Right. A little bit about the European Beer Consumers Union. It's a not-for-profit organisation that's established in Brussels in 2023. Well, it was founded in 1990 with a number of European beer organisations, primarily Camera, Pint, and Zitos. Currently, there are 19 member organisations from 17 different countries, and EBCU is the voice of 180,000 beer consumers across Europe. The mission to preserve and maintain the diversity of beers, to ensure that consumers get the best factual information, because as a consumer-focused organisation, that's what we do, and to sort of protect the consumer from imposition of unfair pricing, to promote labelling. So there's a whole number of things that EBCU get involved with, and I would encourage you, if you're not that familiar, to visit the European Beer Consumers Union website, where you'll find lots of resources and information about us as an organisation. Our strategic goals are listed there, but this is part of the beer education and communication strategy. But we do get involved in environmental issues, beer culture, and well-being as well. Next month, the presentation is going to be by Chris Gooch, who's a brewer from Team Valley Brewery in Worcestershire in the UK, and he's going to be talking about green hop beer. That's a speciality of his, and he works with other breweries. So do what you done today. Get a ticket. They are free, and we do encourage you to get your tickets early. So that's it. I'm going to now hand over to Christine, who's going to start the workshop and hand over. And welcome to Christine and Anikó for beer and chocolate.
Hi, thanks, Brett. Tonight is really a very relaxed sort of session. Both Anikó and I are going to be doing 2 pairings each. Just a couple of things in terms of practicalities. Ideally, have a glass each for each of the beers, that's 4, but the very minimum have 2, including 1 water glass, because that will enable you to be able to clean your palates between the different pairings. We will be asking people questions, so we'll be doing it via chat. We'll try and keep it as interactive as possible. It's the problem with doing things online. You can never quite get the same sorts of things as you can face to face, but Anikó and I will try and do our best to keep it interactive. So have your template ready. That gives you the list of the beers and the pairings as we go through. And without more ado, I'll just cover what we're going to cover tonight. We're going to be talking about how we taste. We're going to be talking about how we match beer and with food, particularly around the 3 C's, and that's generally used by the Beer Association in the States, and it's a way of doing it. But Anikó will go into a little bit more detail about beer matching, and particularly about why beer is good with cheese, which is also we're covering. We're then going to do the 4 beer and chocolate combinations, and at the very end we're going to ask you what your favorite beer was that you had, what's your favorite chocolate, and what your favorite pairing is. And the one thing about that is we know from experience that because everyone's palate is different, people will pick up different things and like different things. There's no right or wrong with this. This is all just due to your palate. So anyone got any questions? If not, I'll get going about how we taste. Okay. Right. Okay. So how do we taste? Right. There are 4 basic things we pick up on the tongue. Now, there's a dispute whether this is real, but it still seems to be the way that most sensory people tend to talk about tastings. And all those spots are not someone having measles, it's actually where your taste buds are. So you can see at the front, in terms of sweetness, sour and salty, they tend to be more taste buds at the beginning, and bitterness, salty and sour, there's more taste buds at the back. And this is one of the reasons why you see a tea blender or wine blender make sure that they get the liquid all around their palate. But there's another reason for that, and you'll often see them gargle. And that's because the other thing which is really important is not just your tongue, but your nose. And that's because at the back of your nose, you have the sensory nerves, the sensory receptors, the olfactory nerve transfers the information from your sensory perceptions in the mouth and the nasal cavities to the brain. So what happens is you pick all these things up on your palate and through your nose, and then the brain decides on what it is you're actually tasting. So, and what you're actually smelling. So if I go back to the previous one, you'll see that you'll end up, if I'm having a chocolate cake, the sweetness is on the palate, but the chocolate flavour is actually through the olfactory sensors at the back of your nose. Similarly, if I'm daft enough to eat a lemon on its own, the sourness will be on the palate, but the lemon flavours go up through the olfactory sensors at the back of your nose. And that also explains why we all struggle to taste if you have a cold, because those olfactory sensors get bunged up. So when we're looking at this, it's really important that we think about how we're translating the aromas and the flavors through your palate and through your olfactory sensors at the back. Has anyone got any questions? Okay, I'm just going to touch about very briefly on how we look at the 3 C's before handing over to Anikó. So the 3 C's, the first one is the complement. And that's used to bring out similar flavors in both the beer and food. So you could have, for example, something like a ginger beer with a ginger cake. So the ginger flavors in both the beer and the cake are building on each other, and you get a real hit of ginger. Then you've got something called the contrast. And this is choosing a beer with a completely different taste to the food. So the things like, for example, a porter with an ice cream. So although you might get a bit of vanilla in that porter, there's going to be those contrasts of those roasty flavors in the porter will be a complete contrast to the lemony vanilla flavor in the ice cream. So a two different flavors working together to really get your palate and your nose going. And then you've got cut. And this is where you get the beer to cut through the textures and the flavor in the food. For example, you could have a creek, the sour cherry with something like a tiramisu, where you're using the acidity of the sour beer to cut through the sweetness and the creaminess of the tiramisu. If I was to change the tiramisu to say something like a Black Forest Gatto, then what you'd end up with is the cherries in the creek complementing the cherries in the Black Forest Gatto. So just by making small changes, you can alter in terms of the way in which you're looking and how you're actually looking at the different ways of matching those things together. Majority occasions, actually, it's not as simple as that. And at most of the tastings, it's a combination of at least 2, if not all 3 of them. And I'm going to hand over to, unless anyone's got any questions, I'm going to hand over to Anikó to take us through a little bit more about why beer works so wonderfully with chocolate, and then to go through the 2 tastings. So over to you.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Because I have to say, this is the most exotic place I've been having a tasting, because I'm in a Hungarian Elvis Museum in Budapest. So it's a really interesting, a different kind of a place. But I hope everybody can see my presentation. Somebody can kind of
Everything works fine.
Everything works fine. Okay. So, I mean, you already saw what Christine said about how we taste. And then, and I think one of the most important thing is what she said about that taste is actually, it's a combination of the taste itself and the aromas that you can feel with up your nose. Because, I mean, a lot of us, we've been having a cold, maybe even this year. And when you have like, no, you can't smell anything, you actually don't taste anything, because it's so much more too simple to taste this without the aromas that we feel in our nose. And I think, I mean, in general, beer is the best kind of the beer is the best drink with food, because actually we talk about wine and food, but there's a lot of ingredients like avocado or vinegar, or a lot of dishes, for example, Tex-Mex, which are not that good with wine, but they are excellent with beer. So I think in general, if you talk about beer and food, we can find suitable beer for every dishes in the world. So that's something that I want to embrace. But of course, because wine and beer are different in taste and in ingredients and in the process, how they are made, there's some differences between them, how to deal with them when we compare them to food. And for example, I mean, everybody, I hope, know about the main flavors and the main ingredients of beer. We have the malts, which gives always a little bit sweetness. I mean, if we compare that to wine, wine is made of fruit with grapes. So there's always acid in wine, but most of the beer styles, there's no acidity. I mean, of course, we have the sour beers, which are acid, but if we look at the beer map or the beer style map in general, most of the beers, they don't have the acidity, which actually makes it really different to combine them with food. Then, of course, we have the hops. We get bitterness, which is really different from wine, because wine doesn't have that kind of bitterness. It has bitterness, roastiness, it has tannins, but the hops bitterness is really different. Then we have a yeast. That's something which is common because the wine has some similar fruitiness than the yeast gives to beer. And then, of course, we have kind of the mouth feel of beer, which can be really thick or really thin, depending of course, the ABV level, but of all the ingredients in general. So these ingredients gives a unique kind of combination when we mix it with food. And if we look at it in the kind of a taste point of view, I think beer is really suitable with all food, but especially with, if we want to talk about chocolate and desserts in this kind of a lecture, that if we talk about chocolate, the chocolate is really fatty always, even if when it's dark chocolate, it's really fatty. So there's a lot of fat goes into your mouth when you eat chocolate, which is good thing, obviously, because chocolate is nice because it's so fulfilled and rich in your mouth. But most of the beers has carbon dioxide, and the carbon dioxide cuts down, actually the fat cuts down the aromas and makes the next piece of chocolate or next piece of dessert or next piece of food taste like the first one. So the carbon dioxide kind of zeroes down your taste buds memory. And that's why, I mean, if you have beer or actually champagne or sparkling water with your food, then you can feel the aromas of the food better because every bite tastes like the first one. And I mean, you can try that yourself. You take, like, for example, well, not now because now we're tasting beer and chocolate, but you take milk chocolate and then regular water and sparkling water, and you can just try that and you can feel the difference just because of the carbon dioxide. So that's something that when we mix beer with desserts and mix beer with chocolate, that's one of the key points, that we have something which freshens up us. And of course, this way we can eat more chocolate, which is nice, I think, because I love chocolate myself. Then we have the hops, and we're going to try that on a little bit later. And the hops are bitter, and for some people, the bitterness is overwhelming because, like Christine said, we taste differently and we have a different palate. And some people are more, they taste the bitterness better than other people. And that's why for some people, the IPA beers, for example, they can be too rough and too kind of they can overfeel the bitterness. But when you combine them with something which is greasy, for example, chocolate or cheese or street food or whatever, you can feel that the bitterness is like melting down, actually. And the other hand, when the bitterness is melting down in your mouth with greasy food like chocolate or like I don't know, cheese or any kind of a hamburger, something like which has a lot of like fat in them. The other thing is that cuts down the fat in your mouth. So it works a little bit similar than the carbon dioxide, but it doesn't zero your palate. It just cuts down the fat. And that's why, I mean, a lot of IPAs are really nice with like this American kind of dishes with a lot of, or I think, I mean, some like English, like these cheddars or shepherd's pies, things which are kind of fatty. Then, of course, we have alcohol. And alcohol is not just something that we just have there. It's also kind of a mouthfeel, I would say. And the mouthfeel of alcohol is something that it works really nicely with like really intensive aromas. Like, for example, chocolate, we have a lot of fat, a lot of kind of a cacao butter and a lot of rich aromas. So when we think about beers with high ABV, like, for example, like, well, we're going to taste it later. Like, for example, these beers with like barley wines, triples, double IPAs, triple IPAs. Then if you have a nice piece of cheese or nice piece of chocolate with them, you can feel that you don't feel the alcohol in your mouth warming and kind of be overwhelming that much. And then, of course, as Christine says, the 3 C's, that we have all those flavors in the beer, and which are combining, cutting, or kind of working together with a beer. So there's like a lot of good things about beer if you just remember a couple like really, I would say, small things. And beer and chocolate. This is one of my favorite subjects because actually chocolate is really easy to handle. It's really too easy to have lying around. It doesn't, it doesn't need to be stored cold or special places. And when I was working as a restaurant manager, we actually had this thing that every time somebody bought a dark beer, dark lager, porter, stout, imperial stout, we always gave a couple of pieces of chocolate for free with that. Just because we wanted to, of course, sell more dark beers, but also because, I mean, we wanted to people notice that, okay, this is something different. And I remember a lot of times that actually we had like a couple coming to the bar, and then the female was like, okay, they have like beer and chocolate. Well, if you buy this beer, you get free chocolate. And they were like, yeah. The wife was telling the husband that you have to buy this beer because free chocolate. And I mean, 2 pieces of chocolate, but still it created kind of an interesting, different kind of story. And every time people tasted it, they were like, okay, this is different. I didn't notice that you can drink beer with like sweet things, because a lot of time when we talk about beer and food, people are connecting beer with like roasted food or hamburgers or fries or pub dishes or whatever. So I think this is something different as well when you introduce beer and chocolate to people that are not in the beer business. And of course, I mean, when we talk about beer and chocolate, there's the higher alcohol content of the beer that makes it really good with chocolate. And also because there's like a lot of aromas in the beer, mostly in the nose, in the flavor. And when they combine with the chocolate, they are really nicely. And I mean, I used to think that dark beers were the best with chocolate, but now I kind of opened up because, for example, I mean, we have a lot of nice combinations. And that's why, I mean, when we have now the tasting sheet, you can taste the beers and chocolate also kind of the way you want. If you want to try them in different order or different combinations, that's really allowed. And I think it's really good to kind of try them, that you make your own preferences as well. Yeah, any questions so far? Because I think I'm soon going to go to we're going to taste the first one. The first one is one of my all-time favorites. It's the one with the white chocolate and the Belgian style white beer. And I think white chocolate, well, there's spiced white chocolate in the pictures, but don't let that bother you. The white chocolate is something that I actually didn't like before. I think I was thinking that it's too sweet and it just tastes like butter and vanilla. But when I combined it with beer, I was like, okay, now this makes sense. And the way you taste, that first you taste the beer, and then, I mean, you probably all tasted beer, so we don't have to, with Christine, tell you how to kind of taste beer. But you smell it, you taste it, and you let the beer taste sink in. And then you take a little piece of chocolate to your mouth. You can smell the chocolate first. You take a little piece of chocolate in your mouth. You let it melt and kind of in all over your mouth. And when you swallow it, then you taste the beer again. And I think personally that, I mean, the white chocolate for me is like too sweet and too kind of buttery. But when you have this kind of Belgian style wheat beer, which is slightly citrusy, slightly apricots, kind of aroma-like, then the fruitiness and the citrusness, it cuts down the too buttery kind of a feeling in your mouth. And the white chocolate comes really nice and vanilla kind of flavored. And together it makes a little bit this kind of a cheesecake, vanilla cheesecake kind of a aroma. And at the same times, I think because the wheat beer, the Belgian style wheat beer has a nice kind of a solid carbon dioxide bubbles. It cuts down, like washes away the greasiness that normally stays with white chocolate in your mouth. But any comments? Christine, how do you feel this first pair?
Yeah, I enjoy this. We used to have an artisan chocolate maker, and they used to do a white chocolate with lemongrass.
Oh.
And so when you ended up particularly with like a golden ale, something really fruity, something with citra hops in it, the two used to just explode in your mouth. It was beautiful.
How about anybody else? Any brave people to comment?
Actually, unfortunately, I don't have any beer with me. I kind of came late. I was completely confusing my joining, and it's still 11 a.m. to myself. But one question that when you mentioned the beer, I immediately get like Duvel as a type of the beer in my mind. But what? Like,
no, I was we were putting down Hoegaarden, which is like the iconic kind of a iconic.
Oh, wheat beer, yeah, of course, yes. Okay, yeah, okay, yeah. That was my question. Like, which one do you think? Because Hoegaarden is widely available here as well, so it's good choice.
Yeah,
now I know.
Yeah, because it's like really citrusy and kind of a yeah.
Great, yeah. I admire you can drink the beer already. Like I just traveled last night, so I didn't have time to pick up my beers from the shop. So I just have to look you enjoying it also.
Any other comments?
Well, I couldn't get Hoegaarden, so I'm afraid I had to go for a mass production. I've got
that's good as
Blue
well.
Moon, which is
that's I think because I kind of I think that's a Hoegaarden copy actually. So it's really similar.
Yeah, and that I have plenty in a local shop as well. So that's easy access to. Thanks.
Any other comments? Did you like it or did you didn't like it or?
Hi, Anikó.
Yeah.
This is Grant Cook in Islamabad. My camera's not working for some reason. The white beer that I was able to get is not a very good one. It's Kronenberg 1664 Blanc. However, the addition of the white chocolate definitely improves it. So I'm impressed by the match.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, I think these actually Kronenberg is really nice with this combination as well. So it's, you know, it's really suitable, I would say. And if you like other beers as well, you can put it in chat because it's interesting to see what kind of beers do you have? Because of course we have put some references, but then again, everybody has different beers in their countries and these international things as well. But this is something that I always kind of this is something that I actually a lot of times serve as a like really nice dessert that I put the Hoegaarden in these little like frosty glasses, and then I put like little white chocolate. And it's something that if you don't want to have a big dessert, this is something that everybody likes basically.
Hey, one more, and my apologies again joining late. So you probably already mentioned this. Did you mention the temperature? Like, was without knowing, I have a like feeling that I would probably have the beer warmer than usual when enjoying with the chocolate. But I only have tried the really dark beers with the chocolate. So now when you're going in a more like, you know, exactly wheat beers and things, are you thinking them to be warmer than your usual temperature when matching with the chocolate or?
Well, maybe a little bit. I do think that this Belgium style of wheat beer should be like relatively cold, because if it gets too warm, it gets over fruity, and then has like this over fruitiness, which is not that pleasant, I think. The chocolate should be room temperature, because if the chocolate is cold, then you can't taste anything. But the chocolate should be room temperature. But I think the beers, I mean, if it's a light wheat beer, it can be cold, because then when you kind of tasted it and you like slowly enjoy it, it becomes warmer and warmer. And the glass actually warms pretty fast.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Okay, and there's people putting in the chat also what kind of beers do you enjoy? Okay, any questions? Because then I'm gonna go to the other one, and then the other one is actually the one this is something that I actually learned in UK. We were traveling around with Maria, my friend, and doing this beer travel book. And I was complaining to Maria that, you know, I don't like British IPAs and bitters so much. I can't find kind of a way to taste them or some. And then Maria and me, we were tasting together these beers with milk chocolate. And suddenly the beer made sense to me. And I mean, the milk chocolate is pretty strong in flavor, even though we think that milk chocolate is like, it's really melts in your mouth. But if you tried it with the Belgian wheat style of beer, it's too strong for it. I mean, the beer disappears. So you need the beer to be like more character. And I think these East Coast IPAs or premium British bitters, they have the strength to face the milk chocolate. And there's like sweetness and richness to the chocolate, but let's not forget that there's actually a lot of cacao butter in there, which makes it like really strong in flavors. And I think that these beers, which has a caramel malty sweetness, to kind of combine the sweetness of the chocolate, but also this really nice bitterness to cut down the aromas of the chocolate. These are the combinations which is really kind of a it's a little bit different, because a lot of times people are not combining bitters and any kind of IPAs with chocolate. But I think this is a really interesting combination. And if you have like problems with the bitterness of the beer, then with milk chocolate, you can kind of build these aroma bridges that you get used to this bitterness and this flavor, kind of train yourself to taste the beer better. What do you think about, Christine, this combination?
I have to say it's one of my favorite combinations. I have a beer which is my standby beer and cheese, which is Fuller's 1845. It's a 6.3, so it's very much on the strong end, but it's got lots of fruit in it. Fullers have a yeast which gives you orange characters, so it's got a bit like fruit cake with a bit of orange marmalade, and it cuts through the sweetness of the milk chocolate really well. I often have these in my cupboard just for having after dinner.
And I mean, one of my kind of go-to IPAs for this milk chocolate is the Brooklyn Brewery is a classic, the East Indian Pale Ale, which is kind of a similar, like caramel malt, and then the bitterness, but also like this with the British bitters a lot. And this is like my way to drink bitters before I kind of then got used to them a lot. Any other comments? What do you like? Is this a good combination, bad combination? Comments? Brave one, somebody? I know it's hard to comment when you have this
I
many
have
people.
comment as usual, like absolutely inspiring. I will do this when it's the first possible moment.
Good. Okay. And please put your beers down in chat, because it's really interesting to look them over and see what kind of beers did you choose. Because like I said, there's different beers for different country and different, so it's really interesting. And now I'm going to hand over to Christine. I'm just have to see how kind of a,
Hi, Anikó. Thank you for that. I'm sure people appreciate it. And if you have any questions for Anikó, she'll be looking at the chat, so you don't have to think about questions now. We can do it as we go along. Now we're doing one of the traditional combinations. I think everyone's mentioned it, dark beers and chocolate. Let's talk around again. It would be really interesting to see whether people have a porter or a stout. And if they have a stout, do you know what type of stout it is? Because it could be a dry stout, it could be an oatmeal stout, it could be a milk stout, so in other words with lactose, or it could even be an oyster stout. And each of those stouts give you a different profile. So although we're doing it with a dark chocolate, how you find it will depend very much on what type of stout you have. So please send in a note through whether you have a stout or a porter, and if you have a stout, what type of stout you have. Okay. The thing about these particular beer is, and why it's so traditional, is because, of course, is that it's got all of those roasty notes that you get in a chocolate, which is what Anikó was talking about. So what we've got here, I mean, I've got a porter from a Durham Massey, which is a beer up in the northwest of England. It won CAMRA's Champion Winter Beer a few years ago. It's only 5.2, but I think that comes back to it's a bit stronger certainly in Britain than we would normally drink in a pub. And that comes back to what Anikó was saying about the higher alcohol contents doing better with chocolate, because if you had something like a beer which was only 3.8%, the fattiness of the chocolate would just overwhelm the beer. So the carbonation, as Anikó said, and the strength of that alcohol really is what you need. Unfortunately, that means, of course, that if you're going to have an evening tasting beer and chocolate, you've got to have more alcoholic beers. So what are we looking for in this combination? Well, you smell it, and with a bit of luck, you'll be getting chocolate and coffee, those roasty sort of characters. And when you smell your dark chocolate, you should be picking up the same sorts of things. So we've got here what we call a complement. So the roasty characters in the beer complementing the chocolate. So have a taste of it, have a taste of your beer, give it a good sniff. Don't forget to smell your chocolate. We're not very good, I think, about smelling our food before we taste it, but we really should, because it gets your juices going. So let's have a taste of the beer. Get it all the way round, and with a bit of luck too, you'll be getting a little bit of sweetness, unless you've got a really dry stout. And again, you're getting the roasty characters with the chocolate. So have a taste of the chocolate. Let it settle. Use the beer to refresh your palate. And you should be getting a building up of those roasty chocolate characters on your palate. If you've got a porter, porters tend to be a bit fruitier. You might be getting black plums, black cherries maybe on some of these beers. And that slightly fruity character helps cut through the black chocolate. What also matters is whether or not this is a high alcohol content, high in terms of cocoa fats. So in other words, if you look at your chocolate, it often will tell you the percentage of cocoa solids. And the higher the cocoa solids, generally speaking, the drier the chocolate, but not always. And often you can get a bitterness there. So if you've got a very dry stout and a very high solid dark chocolate, they can sometimes clash together. So the whole thing ends up being a bit intense and a bit rough. Whereas if you've got a little bit in terms of the sweetness in the beer, it will complement the dryness and the sort of bitter character you often get in dark chocolates. So how have people got in terms of the cocoa solids? Has anyone got anything around 70%, out in the cocoa solids? Because those are usually quite dry. Oh, 14%. Wow, that'll cope with most chocolates. Yeah, you need a really strong chocolate to be able to cope with a 14% alcohol. So a 70% cocoa solid will really go well with that sort of strength of a beer. If you're not careful, though, if you have a weaker chocolate, the alcohol and the intensity of flavour in Imperial Russian stouts would just completely overtake the chocolate. So you'll get no compliments. It'll just be a complete cut, and one will overdo the other. So 70%, yeah. 7.2%, yes, Imperial Russian stout. If you've got a dark chocolate with that, if it's high in alcohol in solids, again, you might find that a bit rough. But I'd be interested to see how it goes. Yeah, all too intense for you. Yes, yeah. It's a really great combination, but you really need to find both the right chocolate and the right beers for your palate. Because if somebody really might like an Imperial Russian stout with a 70% cocoa solid beer, so chocolate, and somebody else won't. But if you took 100 men and 100 women, it comes back to what Anikó was saying, is that the women are more likely to dislike the bitterness than the men. It's a genetic thing that they believe it's because women used to try the food before giving it to children, and therefore bitterness was considered an off flavour. But it's not true of everybody, but on average it is. So anyone got any other comments on this? Again, you could try exactly the same and just alter the beer slightly, have a slightly lower cocoa solids chocolate, and you'll end up with a completely different flavour. Wow. A wheat stout. Okay, that might help because it'll liven it. You should be getting a little bit of lemony character from it, and that'll lighten it. So that's quite that just help the drinkability, I think. Anikó, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, I think, I mean, because I'm not a friend of like dark chocolate in general. So I do need kind of a beer to kind of a complement that, I think. Because I'm those people who are I taste bitterness really strongly. And I think and somehow the chocolatey bitterness is really harsh for me. And that's why I like personally a porter beer, because then, like you said, the fruity character is kind of a little bit rounds up the harshness of the dark chocolate.
Yeah, I've got a question. I'm actually not far, 7 miles, about 10 kilometers from Cadbury's, which are famous for Bourneville.
Yes.
So, you know, it's common to have chocolate around here. And a lot of people work at the Cadbury's factory, but one of their chocolates, you can still get it. It's called Old Jamaica. Now, Old Jamaica has got rum. It's got a rum flavor, so rum and raisins. So I think it's a fairly dark. I don't know what percentage of cocoa is. I could look it up. So my question is, based on what you've just said, what would be do you think would be a good beer combination for Old Jamaica? That's a rum and raisin type beer.
Something with some fruit in it. So a good porter, or actually something like a cherry porter, plum porter would go well with it. So Titanic would probably be able to hold its own. So something with, if you have a fruit beer, ideally a naturally fruit beer rather than a syrup or an artificial one, and that should be able to cope with that without any problems. But a lot of stronger porters will give you those sort of dark raisiny, caramelized fruit flavors, which again should be able to hold its own prep. Anikó, do you want to add anything?
I think the same, and I mean, and also those. I think actually the beers, the dark beers, which has a little bit of barrel, not the too strong ones, because I mean the barrel kind of vanilla and that flavors suit very well with that, like rum and raisin flavor. So maybe some lighter barrel aged beer, like lighter barrel-aged imperial stout, not the darkest ones. Maybe that.
Maybe one thing, if you know, if you have a like inspirational opinion, I have this thing. I really like the chocolate which is having chili, like, you know, the spicy chocolate, and I really did like. I'm sorry to say, maybe, you know, you don't like that mixing beer with this stuff, but I really like it, the Sriracha stout, which was spicy, strong stout. And I was wondering, like, I haven't tried yet if chili chocolate with some imperial stout kind of tasting. Do you have any like immediate ideas that would you think it works?
It's down to your palate. Your palate's unique to use your fingerprint. What you might think is absolutely gorgeous, somebody else will absolutely hate. But don't forget that a lot of the hops in beer will give you a spicy character anyway, or peppery character naturally. So you may find just a stronger beer using which has got a hops in which are spicy will help build up. But the problem you may have is that it may tip over and you'll end up with too intense. But if you like spiciness, pick beers which have used hops with a high spicy character, and then you'll really get your spicy hit.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, no one's got anything else. We'll go on to the last one. Okay, and this time we're doing the either the triple or a barley wine. Barley wines, I'm sure, are more difficult to get hold of outside the UK. So please drop us a note to see whether or not you've got a triple or whether you've got a barley wine, and let's see what variations we've got. We're doing this with a chocolate with fruit and nuts. Now, again, there are all sorts of combinations in this. You might have a milk chocolate with both nuts and raisins or other fruit. You may end up with a dark chocolate with fruit, or you may have a dark chocolate with just nuts, or a milk chocolate with just nuts. So all of these, when you smell the chocolate, you hopefully will pick up what those added ingredients are, but that will impact on the balance. And just altering one of those, so for example, if you've got just nuts in rather than just fruit in, you will end up with a different flavor experience than you would if it was then on its own. So this is, I've got a dark chocolate with both fruits and nuts in, but you'll have different things. So let's have a look at this next beer. And the one thing, whether or not you've got a triple or whether you've got a barley wine, is that these are sweeter and stronger. My one is a whole 8.3. Not as strong as some of you have been drinking, but yeah, okay. If somebody's tried something else, at the end of the day, there's no right or wrong on this. We've just given, both Anikó and I just given some suggestions. There are lots of other different combinations which might suit your palate. Now, what I'm looking for in a good barley wine is something which is golden, can be darker, can be amber. This one is a very unusual one. It's from Chiltern Brewery, which is from Buckinghamshire, and it's called Bodgers. And I'll tell you what Bodgers mean at the end. It doesn't mean to mess up. And so when you're smelling this, what you should be getting is the fruitiness and the maltiness on the nose. And the main difference between a barley wine and a triple is that with a barley wine, it's driven by the malts, the hops, and the alcohol, and it's usually aged before it's put into the market. And this typically it's aged for about 6 months, then bottled, and often then aged for another 6 months before it's put out. Because when it starts, it's really, really highly hopped. And what happens, of course, as the beer ages, the hops and the bitterness reduces, and the beer becomes more mellow and more complex. If you have a triple, then you've got the yeast there in terms of its flavours as having a bigger impact. So you're getting the fruity characters, the esters, things of bananas and pears and other things. But again, you should be looking at a beer that's well balanced. Generally speaking, the triples are slightly more highly carbonated than a barley wine, but not always. But most of our barley wines tend to be more lightly carbonated. But I like these type of things because I get lots of marmalade with it, and I love orange marmalade. So the sweetness there. So have a sip of it and really get the measure of the beer. This beer is the beer I'm drinking is well out of date. But I like it that way. I like the barley wines that have been well aged. They're softer. My palate is such that I'm not that keen on really, really bitter beers. And the older the beer for me in barley wines, often the better they get. Quadruple. Just somebody to go over there. Never mind about the normal triples. Let's go for the top. Okay. So when you've had a taste of the beer, have a sniff of your chocolate. Do send me a note of whether or not you've got a milk or a dark chocolate and what it contains, whether it's nuts or fruit. Mine's got both. I'm getting the cocoa, the roasted notes on the nose, but I'm also getting a little bit of fruit. Nuts, not so much. So when I'm going to taste this, I'm hoping that the fruitiness in my barley wine will enhance the fruitiness in my chocolate and vice versa. And it does. It does. The fruitiness is really building on each other. And the beer is cutting through the fattiness of the chocolate, as Anikó went into. And it's also that slight bitterness is taking off the edge of the sweetness of the particular chocolate I've got, because my chocolate's a little bit on the sweet side for my normal palate. So again, it's entirely up to you how your palate is reacting to this. And you might find, if you've got something sweet, go back and try it with the dark chocolate. You may prefer it plainly with the dark chocolate because you're getting more of a contrast there. Anikó, do you want to add anything on terms of this?
Yeah, actually, when I had a Finnish brewery called Mallaskoski, and their barley wine, which is rather kind of not that hoppy and more on the sweet side of barley wine, kind of a traditional sweet. And then I had like a semi-dark chocolate, 60 of cacao, and then fruits and nuts. And I think that combination is a little bit like, it's really similar to this English Christmas cake and barley wine, because then there's, in the chocolate, there's some strength, but then also these like really sweet aromas of the dry fruit and the nutty ones. And I think this is something that, I mean, of course, we are going towards summer, but this is something that I really enjoy. Well, the Finnish cold summer nights, and then of course the UK winter, I would say. But it's a really classical and kind of a, I think I really feel kind of a little bit like classic when I taste it, because I think this is something, yeah. And I think that the barley wine, I mean, the triple is really nice. It's more fruitier. I tried it, and I think with the triple, it's nicer that you have a little bit on the chocolate is a little bit more milkier. So maybe like milk chocolate with then the fruits and the nuts, and then the barley wine. I think the barley wine handles better with the like darker chocolate as well.
I know we're talking about chocolate today, but I really like these beers with soft blue cheeses, things like Roquefort, Stilton.
Oh.
They're just wonderful. And it's talking about beer. I much prefer beer with cheese than I do with wine. I find wine, just with the exception of probably a dessert wine, I find it's too much of a clash. Beer is much better for my palate, much better combination.
Me too. And actually, yeah. And actually, that is actually true, because wine always has sharpness because of the acid. And they are, I mean, much more harder to combine with like a lot of different cheeses. But for example, triple and barley wine are actually, they suit with every cheese. They don't argue with any kind of cheese. So if you want to have like one basic one with the cheese plate, it's actually better to have beer than wine.
Yeah, I agree. We've got fruit and nut with Capri's fruit and nut, not true. Okay, yeah, but yes, yeah. Okay, that's great. I mean, there's some lovely combinations going on here. But at the end of the day, the whole purpose of this is to practice. I mean, the best idea is to take one beer and have loads of different chocolates and just try them and see which ones you like best. Or the other way around, just have lots of different beer and one chocolate and try that. Because you'll get to know what things you like and what things you don't. And as I said, everyone's palate is different. Everyone likes different things. And there's no right or wrong with this. It just comes down to your palate. And Anikó and I today have just tried to give you some pointers of what to think about. Has anyone got any other questions for us? If not, I'm going to
nice comments here. I think a lot of nice comments here.
Yeah,
well, we're not gonna
chocolate mousse. Oh yes, brew with chocolate mousse. What a great idea. Wonderful. Yeah, the sweetness taking off the acidity of the old brew. Yeah, definitely. Really nice combination. So of course
we can. Yes, just continue.
Yeah, I'm going to ask everyone, and do try this, because again, there's no right or wrong. Out of all the combinations you've had on you've tasted tonight, what was your favourite chocolate, and what was your favourite beer? The combination. So, who liked your white chocolate and your wheat beer? Who liked your the bitters or the West Coast IPAs with the milk chocolate? Who liked the dark chocolate with the dark beers? And who liked the triple or the barley wine with the chocolate and with the nuts and fruit? So just get an idea. Again, nobody's palate is exactly the same. So just send me and Anikó a note saying which ones you like the best, and we'll wait for your answers.
Yeah, and I have to say that of course we can't cover everything, I mean, in this, but one of my favorites, which we didn't cover, is actually the cherry beers, the Creeks with dark chocolate, because that's like a kind of the Austrian cake. I can't remember the name of the cake, but you Austrian people know that. But because it's cherry and dark chocolate. Schwarzwald cake. I think that's and Sacher as well. Yeah, Sacher torte. That's that's like a classical combination as well.
Ah, okay. Oh, somebody, yeah, Fuller's London Porter, yep. So lots of people are coming up with the dark combinations, which is, yeah, I think some of these others are, oh, Nipa and a milk chocolate, excellent. Great.
And there's the Finnish classical
yeah, we go. Absolutely, yeah, it is. I must admit, until I started doing chocolate and beer tastings, I never would have touched a white chocolate. A bit like you, Anikó, never would. But it does go well with some beers, no doubt about it. Yeah. And there's some great chocolates in the UK which have got dark cherries in, which would be perfect for you were saying with the Creek. That sort of complementing each other. All right. Anything else? Come on, no, make it's no right or wrong. Make a punt. Just tell us what you thought was the best.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, you all have different beers, so I mean, they taste a little bit differently. So that's why the combinations are different as well.
Yeah, it would be very difficult for us to get beer around to everybody. Very expensive. Okay, yeah. Right. Okay. So some really interesting things. So if anyone's got any other comments, I'll take now. If not, I'll hand back to Brett to finish us off. Brett, are you still there? You haven't fallen asleep yet?
Yeah, thanks, Christine. I've just muted. I think we got another good combination tonight, and that was Christine and Anikó, a fantastic combination. Thank you both for a fantastic workshop. It was brilliant, and still the comment.
Oh, Titanic raspberry wheat. Oh, of course, with raspberry chocolate. Yeah, great combination.
I love these combinations.
I like the idea that if there's certain chocolates you don't like, you find a beer. You keep drinking beer until you find one that works.
Yeah.
And I suppose that could work the other way around. If you don't like, maybe you keep trying different chocolates until you find the one.
Absolutely.
As to which order you do it in, I'll leave that up to you.
I had to do quite a few for the Isle of Man Beer Festival to find the best combinations. And believe me, you get very tired. It's great fun, but you get very
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just going to let this, if anyone wants to cut in and ask any questions either through the chat or online, feel free to do so.
Off to watch European Song Contest.
Now it's starting.
Okay.
So.
We can't compete with that, can we?
We can't compete, can we? No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone in Malmo. Okay.
Great.
Yeah. Thanks very much, both. Seriously.
You're welcome.
And, as I said, this will be recorded, so if you want to pick up any favorite bits, then you'll be able to get it. It'll appear on the EBC website, hopefully in the next week. But thanks everyone, and we look forward again. Thank you to Christine and Anikó again, and we look forward to seeing you next month for green hop beer. Thanks all. Cheers.
Thanks, Brett. All right. Bye.
Thanks.